Tex calls me the Top Gun guy, but I'm really not. But it's funny that Tex is speaking tonight because about 3 years ago I spoke here, and I talked to Tex previous to that, and I said, hey, I'm a patriotic motivational speaker. I'd love to speak at the men's roundup. He said, yeah, I got you on the calendar somewhere. Well, lo and behold, he calls me Monday morning and says, hey, Stoller, you still want to speak at men's roundup? I go, yeah. He goes, all right, you're on tomorrow. So I'm glad he gives himself a no-notice speaker engagement as well. So, well, I've known Tex since 1995, and he's a very humble guy. So he showed up at the wing I was at, and I was like, who's this Tex guy? So of course, as young captains and lieutenants, we did some investigating. Well, it turns out he is a no kidding war hero. So he joined the Air Force out of ROTC from TCU in 1970, went through pilot training, and a year later he finds himself in Vietnam, what they call Southeast Asia. Well, almost 54 years ago to the day, he has his first flight in the A-1 Skyraider. And if you see the war movies in Vietnam, there's a lot of what we call air defense artillery as well as SAMs out there. So Tex was in the thick of things. So get this, he had 104 sorties over there. He had 13 successful recoveries of airmen that were down. He ends up getting 3 Silver Stars, 8 Distinguished Flying Crosses, which is unbelievable. And top it off, yeah, no kidding. And in one story, he landed his Skyraider and they counted 240 bullet holes in the side of the airplane. I don't know how that thing was still flying. So good on you, Tex. Wow. Well, Tex, after that, advanced through his career and ended up at my wing, like I mentioned. And I'm a dumb young captain, right? I'm drinking beer, playing rugby, and flying airplanes. Life doesn't get much better. So you don't care about the wing commander until your squadron commander calls you one night and says, hey, what are you doing Friday? I said, well, I'm going to the wing Christmas party. He goes, okay, great. You get to escort the general's daughter. I'm like, whoa, okay. So I took Stephanie to the wing Christmas party, and I think everything went okay because I was not called into his office the next morning. However, when he left the base, he went to AFPC here in San Antonio, which was in charge of all the assignments for guys like me. He went to Texas. I got sent to Korea. So anyway, Tex went on to a very distinguished career. He is a war hero. He's my hero. So it's my pleasure to introduce the speaker for tonight, General Tex Brown.
All right, thanks, Stoley. Yeah, he was a young F-16 pilot in the wing I was commanding, and I don't know if you remember, but he did take Stephanie to the Christmas party. It was about a week or two later that there was the New Year's Eve formal big function at the officers club, and my exec then took Stephanie to that function. He was also a lieutenant who worked for me. 9 months later, they got married. Yeah. So yeah, that assignment was a good one for us. Well, I've got a lot of things on my mind, a lot of things I want to say. I kind of want to, I've got some notes to make sure I don't get too off track. First of all, it is Veterans Day. This day started as Armistice Day. Many of you may know the history. We came out of World War I, the war to end all wars. There was never going to be a world war like that again. Well, not so fast. And the war ended on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of really 1918 is when the ceasefire started between the Axis powers and the Allied powers. It was really about 8 or 9 months later for the actual armistice was signed at Versailles in France. And then our president, President Wilson, on the 1-year anniversary of the stop of the shooting on the 11th, he just declared 11 November would be Armistice Day, to thank all those that had rescued our nation and the rest of the world from the world conflict. Well, it was Armistice Day for maybe another 15, 20 years. And then World War II comes in. Wow, we got a whole nother war, even bigger than the last one. And in 1954, this was changed because Armistice Day was to celebrate those who had served our nation in World War I. And so then Veterans Day became the nomenclature in 54. And for a little while, it moved. It moved from the first Monday. Remember when we did all these holidays on first Monday, and it didn't matter what? We still have some of the holidays like that. Well, not Veterans Day, not July 4th. Oh, by the way, not Christmas. It is on a certain day. So we still celebrate today, and we thank really all veterans, all those who have served, put the uniform on of our nation, and those currently serving. And let's not forget those today that are in harm's way, that are serving. I'll tell you, the young men and women serving us today are even better than I was, better than we were. So that's what today is about. It's to remember and thank those that have served and those that are currently serving, keeping us free. Well, that's a little history on Veterans Day. We've got some services that are all represented. The Army, the Air Force, the Marines, the Navy, Coast Guard. Now we got a force called the Space Force. So I'm going to talk a bit about those in a few minutes. My career started in 1970, like Stoley said. It started when I joined NROTC in 68, but in 70 I came out of college and I graduated on, I think we had graduation on a Friday night there in Fort Worth at TCU. Saturday we had a commissioning service. Sunday I got in my car and drove to Laredo Air Force Base, and I reported in Monday morning for pilot training. It was either take the class right then or wait 3 or 4 months for the next opening. And I said, what am I gonna do, flip hamburgers at McDonald's for 3 months? Come on, I'll go right now. So I didn't take any vacation, any leave. And I did the same thing coming out of pilot training. I got that A1 assignment to go fly this old ancient airplane called the Sky Raider. And I was pretty excited about that. I remember there was an instructor pilot at Laredo who had flown Sky Raiders, and he was pumping me up, telling me how great it was. There was another one, I'll never forget him, I won't say his name. I went to see him and he said, you, Lieutenant, you can't hack it. You won't make it. You'll never get there. And it's closing down. Don't even dream about it. It's funny how you remember those good and bad conversations that you have. It's interesting. I see that same guy now at Sky Raider Union, and he acts like we're best friends. He doesn't remember, but I do. I have forgiven him. I just haven't forgotten. Well, there was a class right after pilot training. There was an A1 class right away, or I could wait. And I took it right away. No leave, no vacation. I gotta get through this training because they're gonna shut down the airplane. And then I went through the different schools, the jungle school and water survival and all these things. In fact, there's one that's a POW survival. I got to tell you, that wasn't a fun school. But fortunately, I never was a POW. Then I would have been thankful I had that school. So I spent a year flying combat. Stoley talked about the one mission I came back with well over 200 holes in the airplane. It was a rugged old airplane. I'd only lost 2 pistons. I mean, it's got 18. How many do you need, you know? It was running a little rough. I could tell that. I'll never forget my wingman line comes up on me, and I'd taken a couple of SA-7 shots that I'd dodged and lots of AAA and small arms. But we rescued a 6-person Marine helicopter crew that day, call sign Lady Ace, on July 7th, 1972. My wife says, you can remember details about things that happened 50 years ago. You can't remember what I wore to church last Sunday. I said, I'm sorry, babe. Something about the adrenaline and that gets in when you're in combat situation. Yeah, my wingman joined on my wing and comes up on my right side and says, hey, you're pretty clean over here. He comes over to the left side and he goes, oh, you look like Swiss cheese on this side. I said, yeah, it's running a little rough. And the power wasn't responding. So fortunately, we weren't far from Da Nang, and I was able to land it back at Da Nang, and only had 1 gear collapse, but it was okay. It's a rugged old airplane. I'll never forget the crew chief comes up the side of the airplane. I'm off on the side, and he comes up the side and he says, you ruined my airplane. I said, they were shooting at me. Come on. Fix it. I got to go fly again tomorrow. So, one story I'll tell you from that year. So I was, we flew close air support for troops on the ground. And I got to tell you, for about 5 years when I came home from Vietnam, if I walked into an Army bar or a Marine bar and they saw my Sky Raider bracelet, I couldn't buy a round in that bar, because they knew that I probably, or guys like me, had flown over the top of them and maybe saved their lives, because that was close air support. We did a lot of that. The other mission we flew were search and rescue. Stoley talked about I was in on 13 different rescues where pilots get shot down, or crews. Sometimes it was a whole Marine crew, helicopter crew, or front and back seaters in an F-4 or an F-8. And I'll never forget, there was a Navy F-8 got shot down in the northern part of South Vietnam, right near the A Shau Valley. And it's June of 1972. Sandys have come in. That's the A-1 guys ahead of me, and they've flown over him and tried to clean the area out to make it safe for a helicopter. They are bingoed out. That means they ran out of fuel. So me and my wingman come in, and we take over. And I found the survivor. I'm talking to him on the radio, and I've got a pretty good idea as I've flown over him where he is. And he's telling me there's bad guys everywhere. He shot a couple of them. He's got a pistol. And I'll never forget this. He's a Navy F-8 pilot. And he says, I got 1 bullet left. And I'm not going to use it on a bad guy, because I'm not going to be captured. So I said, Nickel, you sure? I mean, just Sandy, you got CBU on board? And I said, yeah, I got probably 4 canisters of CBU. That's cluster bomb units. And a canister has 6 tubes, and every tube's got 30 essentially hand grenades in it. So picture 180 hand grenades in each canister, and I got 4 canisters of that. So I've got about, somebody do math in public, here we go, 180 times 4, 360, 720. 720 hand grenades that I can throw out the back end of my airplane, and they're going to go down and arm up, and it's just going to sparkle everything in sight. He says, look, I'm under triple canopy. I am buried, but I'm also surrounded. Put it right on me, because I am not going to be captured. I'll tell you, it was one of the toughest moments in my career, probably, was flying over that fella and dropping all the CBU I had on board. I did know that when you go over and you pickle it out, it goes out the rear end, it spins up, and when it hits the ground, it detonates. And I'd seen enough of it and dropped enough of it to know that right at the core center, there's kind of a donut that gets formed. So I went right over the top of him, and if I drop it just right, he'll be in the donut, and all the rest of the outside of the donut would. So that's what I did. I came off the pass. My wingman's up high watching. And I give him a few seconds, and I come off, and I'm saying, Nickel, Sandy 7, are you there? No answer. Nickel, Sandy 7, no answer. Pull over some more. Finally, Nickel 102, Sandy 7, come up, voice. I'm here, now get my ass out of here. Woo! Boy, was I happy to hear that voice. And we did. We got him out of there. We brought in Jolly Greens, and they could go into a hover because now it's safe enough to bring a Jolly Green in, and we rescued. I got to tell you, when we rescued somebody, and we come back and land, grown men stand and cry on that ramp when you realize you just pulled somebody out of the jaws of death or the jaws of the enemy going to be a POW. So it was a tremendous mission. The Crosshair support was a tremendous mission, but the Sandy rescue missions were even more incredible. So I got to tell you, most guys that went to Vietnam, especially on the ground, that was rough. That was difficult. But not only was I in the air, and my cockpit was my cocoon, but I felt like we were really making a difference, rescuing fellow Americans. Tell you one more story. One time I'm on a SAR. We call it the Silver Bar SAR. There were 4 of us in Sky Raider. Every one of us were first lieutenants. I'd gotten there as a second lieutenant, made first pretty quickly. So I spent most of my years as a first lieutenant. And some of those guys I'm still great friends with. It was the Silver Bar SAR. We've gone into the southern part of North Vietnam to rescue this downed F-4 pilot and his Wizzo. We've flown in high altitude, and then we've dropped down low altitude to stay out of radars. And we're running around low, and actually, I should have changed my fuel. I'm running on a external fuel tank, and when we went down and added power, the rule was go to the main tank. Well, I still had some fuel in the center line, and I wanted to use it up so I'd have more fuel from my main tank. So I left it on external. And I'm down low, and we're flying around and go as fast as we can, which is not very fast. And my engine quits. I knew immediately it ran out of fuel. I was still on the external fuel tank, not on main. So I reached down, changed the lever to main fuel, but it's already quit. So the fuel in the line has already been taken away. So I got to prime it. I got to take the throttle and back and forth a couple. And all this time, I'm down low, and I got no power because the engine has quit. I got 2 or 3 things in a few moments to decide to do. Is it going to restart? Do I need to jump out? Do I get rid of all my stores, all the ordnance, which I'm no good after that? And literally, as I look up, I'm down low, and there's trees in front of me, and there's a gap in the trees. And I aim to that, and there's a huge valley behind it. And I know that God made that happen right then. It wasn't me. I probably should have either died into the tree line or left that airplane. But there was an opening. I glided through that opening. There was a big valley below it, which gave me airspace to time to prime it, pump it back up, and the engine came back to life. And I got to tell you, the guys I flew with never knew what happened because I didn't tell them that I had just let the engine quit. So I got to tell you, I know that I flew a single-engine, single-seat airplane, but God was my co-pilot for that entire year. Now, I had a dad who's a preacher, and y'all heard me talk about him before, and the music we sang, that all came from my dad's quartet days. So I had a dad and mom I know that prayed for me every night. So I know God was with me. Well, I went on to be an instructor pilot at Shepherd Air Force Base. I went on to fly the A-7 in England Air Force Base. Ann and I got married just as I was leaving Shepherd on our way to England. She'd never been in the Air Force, didn't know anything about the Air Force. In fact, at one point she says, "What do you do for a living?" Because at night if we wanted to date or something. I said, well, I fly 2 sorties a day. And then I was playing ball. I was on like 4 different softball teams at the same time. I mean, I'd played baseball in college. So, here I am. And she says, you play ball and you fly airplanes. That's what you do for a living? My taxpayer dollar pays you? When I saw my life through her eyes, I went, why would I stop doing this? I'm having way too much fun. Well, we got married and moved to a foreign country. We moved to Louisiana. And I'm telling you, we were in Alexandria. Anybody been to Alexandria, Louisiana? Yeah. It's not Baton Rouge. Now, I tell you, Baton Rouge is a pretty nice place. In New Orleans, that's its own world. Yeah, Alexandria. Alexandria by the sea, we called it. I flew A7s there. I remember we were living in a roach-filled apartment. We're still trying to find a house. And I'd been there maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And squadron commander calls me and says, you're the new guy, so you get the duty that just got thrust on us for our squadron. We got to send a guy to Fort Irwin to be in the DASC, the Direct Air Support Center, out in the desert with the Army for 3 weeks. Brown, you got it. That's what happens when you're the new guy. Not exactly desired duty, but yes sir, boss. And so I came home and told Ann, well, next week I've got to leave. I'm going out to Fort Irwin in the middle of the desert of Mojave, and it won't be fun. So this isn't like a fun trip. She says, you're leaving during our marriage? What are you talking about? Well, yeah. I said, I got to go TDY. What is TDY? She had no idea what that meant. Well, that was the beginning of a long marriage of learning what the Air Force is all about. So Ann put up with a lot of trips, a lot of TDYs, a lot of me being gone. But all our families have done that. That's kind of the life of the military. Well, we spent 2 years there. I actually came to Randolph for the first time after that and came to the Personnel Center. Stoley talked about me commanding the Personnel Center. I did that in the year 2000. But I had been here as a captain and made major while I was here, handing out fighter assignments, doing exactly what Stoley talked about, handing out assignments to fellow fighter pilots. Somebody in their wisdom years ago thought, instead of having a personnel officer do it, let's let fighter guys actually hand assignments to fighter guys and airlift to airlift guys and SAC guys. So, John, I never gave you an assignment, but I knew the SAC guys that did. And I handed out fighter assignments to a whole bunch of fighter guys. Well, out of that, we went to school for a year, and then we went into Germany, where I flew the F-16. And that was a great assignment. I ended up commanding a squadron there. We were at Hahn for about 4.5 years. I arrived there as a major, and I left there as a frocked colonel, which was pretty unusual and unbelievable. But I went to a joint assignment down at Ramstein, and I had to be wearing colonel to go to the job. Well, let me tell you one story from Hahn. I got a lot of stories. Along all these places, and all of us have served, we probably lost teammates. We train hard. If you're going to go into combat, you got to train like you're going to combat so that when you go into combat, you're not scared of it. You're prepared for it. Well, when you train hard, and I don't care whatever service it is, you have injuries and sometimes you even have deaths. So I remember losing a couple of guys when I was operations officer and then later squadron commander in my F-16 squadrons. Flying is, especially when out there fighting air to air, doing what we call dogfight, it's a dangerous business. But the story I'll tell you is, I got called in by the wing commander. I'm a squadron commander. I'm a lieutenant colonel. The wing commander is a full colonel. He works for a numbered Air Force commander. It's a 3-star who works for the 4-star, who's the boss of all of Air Forces Europe. So the wing commander tells me the 4-star and he and one staff officer are in charge of and planning a mission that my squadron is going to take, and I'm going to lead it. But nobody can know about it. Wow. So you'll work with this one staff officer down at the headquarters, and then you're probably going to make a trip to the place before you go. And I found myself going to Israel. The year's 1986 that I went over on the trip. And we planned a deployment of American fighter jets to Israel, first ever in history. So I came back. We had it all planned out. I picked the 9 airplanes we're going to take. The 9 jocks are going to fly those airplanes. Another 10 or 12 that would go with us. We got to have a maintenance group. And told them all, pack a bag. And I'll tell you when we go. I can't tell you where we're going, and I can't even tell you when. Some day or night, I'll call and say, get your bag and come to the squadron. So that's what we did. And that was in the fall of 86, March 1987. We got the call. I got the call. It was on a Friday night. And I told them all, be at the squadron Saturday morning. Bring the bag that you packed. We put the bags on a big airlift airplane. All the maintenance and logistics people got on that airplane. The people had no idea where we're going. The pilots in the airplane knew. I briefed the 8 other pilots, handed them maps, handed them their lineup card. Then they knew they were going to go land in Israel. But I wasn't allowed to let them get to a phone call. Nobody could tell our wives. We couldn't tell it. For 6 months after we returned, we couldn't tell anybody where we'd been. It was that classified. I got to tell you, though, in the 3 weeks we were there, it was an awesome, unbelievable trip. We took off in the airplanes. We joined up in sets of 3. So I'm the lead. I got 2 guys so close to tucked into my wing, we looked like one radar blip. And I got 3 others. They're tight. These 3 are tight. So we look like 3 radar blips. And all the way through France and through the Mediterranean, we were just, and our call sign, my call sign in all of Europe was Sandy. And they gave that to me. So it was Sandy, 2, 3. That's all we ever said. There were 9 of us. But on radio, we sounded like 3. We looked like 3 on radar. We climbed up, got out over France, got out of the Mediterranean, and then we joined up and spread out and hooked up with tankers. And tankers took us all the way through the Med. We were a little concerned that Libya might launch somebody on us. So there were 3 of us that had real missiles on board. The Libyans never did launch on us, but the Greeks actually did. Well, the Greeks are our friends. So the Greeks sent an F-104 up, and then when they saw there were F-16s, they just peeled back off and went back home. And an Israeli F-16 came out and met us 100 miles out, turned in front. I joined on him, and we flew right down into Israel and landed at a base that as we flew over the base, Ramat David, I couldn't even see it. I knew we were over a base, but it is so camouflaged. You and I built that base. U.S. taxpayers built that base. We pitched out. The runway is kind of like this table against, it would be a brown concrete instead of white. That's why it's hard to see. Landed in, each one landed in a row, taxied off, went downhill slightly, and we disappeared under camouflage canopies. It's an unbelievable place. We flew there for 3 weeks. I asked for, and they let us have personal time on the weekends. And in fact, the Israelis organized buses, and we saw every Christian site you can see. So I had about 200 of us, Americans. I got to tell you, the Israelis, they had us with armed guards, and It's not many places you see a uniformed woman with an Uzi or a M16 draped over the shoulder and ready to use it. And you do not want to upset her because she will use that thing. Wow. That is a country that everybody serves. And they understand what it means about security. We've seen them obviously in the news here recently too. Well, that was our experience. We got to see every Christian site you can imagine, all up to the Galilee, all along the Jordan River, all over Jerusalem. It was a tremendous experience. I got interviewed at the very end by their Secretary of Defense. His name was Sharon, and just a private. He had a cameraman, and we're in a room, and he just, because it's never happened before. So what was the experience like? How was it like? And well, I was just awestruck, and it was tremendous being with the Israeli Air Force. They were tremendous hosts. We had a big, going away party. The next to last or third night before we left there in some cave with the Israeli pilots and ours, and everybody's having fun. And I'd put a quartet together. Can you imagine? I had a quartet of fighter pilots. I had a tall drink of water named Jimmy Jones, who he was a music major in college. He quit, went to OTS, and followed his dad's footsteps, who was a fighter pilot, and here he is, a lieutenant in my squadron. And I got another kid who'd grown up in the church, and he sang baritone in the church choir, and he read music, and Kirk Bartlow, the skull, and he could sing. And actually, there was a young guy who was a captain. He was one of my flight commanders. He was a great pilot, P.K. White. He didn't read a bit of music, but he had an ear like I've never seen, and he could play the guitar. And if I got a song in front of him, he'd memorize it. So I had a top tenor, and he could sing tenor. A lead, a baritone, and of course I sang bass. So we sang for the Israelis. Well, we knocked our socks off, What are fighter pilots doing singing in harmony? Nobody's ever heard of that before, We've seen fighter pilots singing at a bar, but it wasn't in harmony, was it? Like in Top Gun. All right. Well, it was just an unbelievable experience to go to Israel. When I'm in this interview with this fellow Sharon, and I'm telling him how awesome it's been, and they let us drop live ordnance on their range. I got to tell you, in the F-16 in Israel, you go to 3 minutes, you better start turning or you're out of the country. And we could not leave the country. I mean, we were not allowed to fly into Jordan, certainly not allowed to fly into Egypt or go north into Lebanon. We had to stay in the country or out over the Med. So, boy, you didn't go straight for very long. But he said, well, how could we make it better? And I said, well, sir, the only way to make this better would be allow your pilots and our pilots to fly against each other. They didn't allow us to do what's called dissimilar air combat. We could fly against our own guys. They flew against their own, but we never got to fly Americans against Israelis. And I said, I think we'd all make each other better. I'll never forget. He turns to the cameraman and says, turn the camera off. In fact, get out of here. He chases the guy out of the room. So it's just he and I. And he says, Colonel, my pilots are in combat every day. We have enemies. This is 1987. We have enemies to our north, our south, and our east. My pilots think they're the best in the world. And against all of our neighbors, they are the best. If they fight against you, they're going to find out they're not the best. They don't need to be any better. They're the best right now. I said, got it. Man, this is a guy that understood. He understood his Air Force and his military. Well, Han was a great, I could stand all day and just tell stories just from Han and the F-16. Then I went down to Warrior Prep Center in Ramstein, and that was a staff job. That was a difficult job. I was on the road a lot. Our son was born there, though, so that was a great assignment. And then we came back to the States. Spent some time at school. staff jobs, back to NATO. I think we figured out, and then we've been about 17 of my 34 years overseas. So we've seen the world. My family's seen the world. And then, of course, I ended up in the very end in the Pentagon. And that's a difficult place. I'll tell you one story from the Pentagon, though. I've gone there as a brand new, I'm a 2-star. And I'm in the joint requirements business, which is all about money. And in the end, that's what the Pentagon is all about. That's what Washington, D.C. is all about. It's just all about money. You just hope you have some war fighters in the Pentagon that help keep a little bit of semblance of what we need out in the field. And that's why it's important we have the right men or women as our chief and as our leaders there. But the place is about fighting for money. I'm a 2-star, and I'm in the joint requirements business, which is big bucks between the services. And it's the forerunner to the Joint Requirements Oversight Council, the JROC, where the 4 stars truly argue and discuss billions of dollars within the defense budget. The defense budget is given by the Congress to the Department of Defense, and then it's split among the services. So I'm in that business. I don't know much about it. But I get invited, shortly after I get to the Pentagon, I get invited to what's called Flag Officer Fellowship. What's that? That's where flag officers, we say flags because it's generals and admirals, they come together. We do it at 6 in the morning. Well, you get there early anyway. You can beat traffic. And for an hour, you have a Bible study led by a ministry called Christian Embassy, which is a part of Campus Crusade for Christ. Well, yeah, sure, I'd love to do that. I'd been a part of BSF and a couple other places, and Ann and I were really working more and more on our faith, trying to make it better. So I started attending Flag Officer Fellowship. And sure enough, there's some Army guys, and there's some Marines there, of course. Navy, Air Force, it's all services. I don't know what jobs each of us are in. We come in and study the Word together for an hour, and then we go back to our jobs and go back slugging it out in the Pentagon. It's about, I've been there about a month, and I'm in this business of the joint requirements, and my staff is telling me, okay, there's a big briefing coming up, and the poor colonel that's going to give the briefing, everybody's going to kill him. The 3-star who chairs this board, and all you 2-stars sitting around the table, you're going to have something to say. And at slide 8, sir, you've got to pound the table because the Air Force demands that we get whatever it was our way. But understand, at slide 10, the Army guy's going to pound the table and he's going to say the same thing. And that's just the way it goes. That's what's going to happen. So they get me all prepped. This is what I got to do. We walk into the council meeting, and there's the 3-star who's chairing it, and I've got my 2-star chair, and then I think the Navy guy's here beside me, and then there's the Army, and there's the Marine. And we all take our places, and I look over. Who's across from me? One of my Flag Officer Fellowship buddies. One of the guys I'm in Bible study with. Major General Joe Cusmano. Joe, Tex. He's been prepped just like I have. Wow. So it comes to slide 8. And I say, sir, I need to stop the briefer here for a second. Let me just say the Air Force feels pretty strongly about the position that he's about to talk about. But I got to tell you, I'm sure Joe and I can work out something that will make this a win-win for both of us. Without even getting to slide 10, Joe Cusmano says, Tex is exactly right. We'll figure this out, and we'll figure out a way to make it a win for both of us. The 3-star goes, what in the world is going on here? This is not how we do business. You guys are supposed to be coming to fisticuffs. He tells the staff, everybody out of this room. He clears the room of the staff. What are you guys doing? I said, we're going to come up with a compromise. and we'll figure out how to make this work for both of us. Wow, we've never had that before. See, that's what brothers in Christ do. They figure out ways to make solutions in situations that don't look like there's a solution. So that flag officer fellowship was more than just a Bible study to me. It was a way to help me be a better officer, better serve my Air Force, and actually serve my country in ways that need to be done. Well, I went back to the 3-star. I was there on 9/11. We were down in the basement when with a brand new chief of staff. He was on his first day on duty. He'd just taken over the Friday before. He was home helping household goods on Monday, supposedly. And Tuesday morning was his first staff meeting. Tuesday morning, September 11th, 2001. And so every general that was on the air staff is in that room with him. And I'll never forget the airman running in and whispering in the ear of the chief and the secretary of the Air Force. And he says, well, put it up on the, we had these huge slide boards down there. And up we see is the burning tower. And while we're watching, we see number 2. Well, I'm in a room full of probably 40 airmen. At least 30 of us are pilots. And we know about flying airplanes. And it's pretty clear, especially after number 2, this is not an accident. And it's not weather. And it's not, this is intentional. I'll never forget the secretary turns to all of us and says, what do we do? He said, you got to get every airplane in the sky on the ground. Well, nobody can do that but the president. So secretary picks up the phone to call the SecDef. Remember who that was? A guy named Rumsfeld. My dad loved Rumsfeld because he stood up to the media. I got to tell you, Rumsfeld was not easy to work for. Oh, boy. Well, Rumsfeld immediately takes a call from Secretary Roach, and he calls the president. And we all know the story. He's down in a classroom in Florida, and he gets the call, and the president says, do it. I take the advice of my senior airmen and all the country. So that's when every airplane in the sky was told to land immediately. And then we started trying to find airplanes to get airborne to see if we could intercept anybody else that didn't land. Remember, we know at least 2 more didn't land. One of them was headed back for the Pentagon, which we didn't know then, but we know later. And then one of them was turning around out over the field in Pennsylvania when Todd Beamer and his group decided enough was enough. Well, that was a day that changed our country. I got to tell you, I believe President Bush was like Esther. He was a person in that place at that time God had placed. Just like Esther saved the entire Jewish nation because she had the ear of the king that was about to wipe out all Jews. I believe President Bush was the right person in that job right then to bring our nation back to where we need to be. He was a state senator. He's just given up the position. His name is Brian Birdwell. Anybody know Brian? Anybody know Brian Birdwell? Lieutenant Colonel Brian Birdwell, United States Army. He was the exec to one of those Bible study generals that I dealt with, a guy named Van Antwerp. Then a 2-star, later made 3-star. Van was a great, great believer. Man, we had lots of great times together. Well, Van Antwerp and his staff, he had taken a day off out of the building to do kind of let's do an annual review of who and what we are. He was the head civil engineer of the entire United States Army. And so he said, we got to if you don't get away from the building, you can't get anything done. So he had an off-site day for his staff. So they weren't in the building. His secretary was still there. Brian Birdwell was his exec, and he was still there answering phones and taking messages. That airplane entered the west wing of the Pentagon, about the 4th floor, and penetrated all the way into almost A ring. It entered right at the office of General Van Antwerp, and the other wall of that office was the Chief Personnel Officer of the United States Army, General Tim Maud. Lieutenant General Tim Maud was in his office and he died instantly. Van Antwerp was not in his office, he was at an offsite. But his exec and secretary were there. Well, Brian Birdwell had gone down the corridor to the men's room at about 9:31 or 2. Nature call. As he's coming out of the men's room, way down the corridor, that's when the airplane hits. He looks out, all he sees is fireball down the hall. You know, in the movies, these fireballs, these guys run ahead of the fireball. No, that doesn't happen. Down he goes. He's on fire. Now, Brian Birdwell, working for this Van Antwerp, who was a great Christian. Brian Birdwell was a very strong Christian. We were in the same church with him. All he remembers is falling flat on the ground. He's on fire. And he says, all right, Jesus, I'm about to come meet you. This is it. I'm done. And they were in the brand new renovated part of the Pentagon. A lot of people don't realize that. In fact, because it was still just freshly renovated, it wasn't even, a lot of offices weren't even occupied yet. 22,000 people work in the Pentagon. A tenth of the building was destroyed. There should have been 2,200 Americans probably died in the Pentagon. 125, because most of the offices were still vacant. But it had just been renovated. The suppression system was brand new. As he's laying on the ground, within seconds, a sprinkler over the top of him, which probably didn't exist the year before, but had just been fixed, starts spraying him with water. And he's here to tell us the story, because then he rolls over and lets the other side of his body that's on fire get doused. And he gets pulled out. Well, he's in the burn center, the Washington Burn Center. I want to say 50% of his body had 3rd degree. I mean, he shouldn't have lived. He should not have lived. But he did. And he's fully wrapped up. He's got gauze everywhere. He's laying in his bed. And on about the 3rd day, President Bush and Laura come to visit the patients in the Washington Burn Center. There's no movies, there's no cameras, there's no fanfare. He just wants to come see those that have been injured. And President Bush goes to the foot of the bed of Brian Birdwell and stands there and salutes this lieutenant colonel, the commander-in-chief. And Brian's laying there, and he's, again, all you can see about his eyes, and he's kind of laying there, and he's fully got, and he's going, and his wife goes, brings his arm up, and helps him pull a salute. Well, that's a commander-in-chief we had. That's why I say President Bush was the man we needed for that time and that hour. Well, we went on to do a lot of great things to help those families. A fellow named John Van Alstine. Some of you may know that name. I worked with John quite a bit. Lieutenant General, Army. He was head of manpower personnel on the OSD staff. And he took charge for the next 9 months of taking care of families and those that were injured. And that was his full-time job. And he left there to go be the commandant at Texas A&M. That he gave that job up maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Wonderful, wonderful man. He and I were in Bible study. Yeah, we actually carry Bibles in the Pentagon, and it's legal. Last thing I'll tell you about the Pentagon, I was with a guy named Jerry Boykin, Army Lieutenant General, worked for Rumsfeld directly. And we were both now near the end of our careers, and we were asked at different times to speak in uniform, and depending on the crowd, I'd speak about faith. I always gave a disclaimer that this is not the Air Force speaking, this is my personal, and then I'm quite legal to say whatever faith talk I want to give. That is not illegal. I can't say that I'm speaking for the Air Force. Jerry didn't always do a disclaimer. He got a little too excited sometimes and would just start talking about Jesus. Well, somebody had found a video that both Jerry and I were on. I took it to the press. I'll never forget, my brother calls me one day and says, you need to turn on CNN. I said, Tim, that's the Communist News Network. I never watch CNN. Well, you need to watch it now because you're on it. What do you mean I'm on it? They got your mug on there and they're showing some video and there's a guy ranting and raving to the point the CNN commentator's even going, I think you're a little overboard on this. And he was claiming that Boykin and I should both be tarred and feathered and thrown out and put in jail because we were talking about Jesus in uniform. Well, Jerry worked for Rumsfeld. Rumsfeld didn't like the press, so he slapped him around a little bit and said, okay, Jerry, just, give a disclaimer. I got called in by my chief of staff. Tex, can you just stop talking about Jesus? I'll never forget, I told him, well, sir, if I do, the rocks will cry out. He went, what? Okay. All right. When the crowd is right, I'm going to talk about it, but I'll always disclaimer. But I don't talk every time to every crowd, so. Well, a couple quick stories about the services. Every service has their values, has their what's meaning to them. I'll tell you, there's not a Marine that doesn't understand Semper Fi. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. Simple Partis, always courageous in the Navy. The new Space Force has a Semper Supra, always above. Well, I guess they are. They got all the satellites. Air Force, we never had anything like that. So we had a chief who came up with the thing called core values, and every airman in the Air Force today knows the three words that represent our Air Force: integrity, service, and excellence. Integrity first, service before self, excellence in all you do. I'll tell you, those are words that come really right out of the Bible. In fact, the word integrity is used when Job, his wife said to him, let your integrity go and just die. Curse God. He says, woman, shut up and get behind me. Boy, that's a pretty brave man when you're telling us. Well, there was a great athlete out of Beaumont, Texas. Maybe the greatest athlete that ever lived. You're trying to think, Jim Thorpe was in. It's a woman. Her name was Babe Didrikson Zaharias. She married George Zaharias later. Babe Didrikson grew up playing all the games with the boys. In fact, they named her Babe because she could hit the ball farther than anybody else on the ball field. Well, Babe was in the, I want to say it's the 32 Olympics in Los Angeles. Remember the 36 Olympics? Jesse Owens. Boy, in Berlin, what a time for somebody like Jesse to do what he did. But 32 Olympics, mostly men, but there's 3 or 4 women's events. Babe wins 2 golds and a silver. Well, there weren't any professional track athletes, so what's she going to do? She picks up a tennis racket and teaches herself the game of tennis. Within 3 years, she's on the tennis tour, winning every tournament. It wasn't even a challenge. Scott, you should have played her. That'd have been good. She gives up the tennis racket, says, well, looks like there's a ladies' golf tour. I'll go play some golf. She never had a golf club in her hand in her life. She's an athlete. So within 3 or 4 years, she's on tour. And then she's winning almost every tournament there is. So at the 40s, if you look, you'll see Babe Didrikson is the #1 golfer, female golfer in the country, maybe in the world. It's somewhere in about 46 or 47. It's the Women's U.S. Open. It's the last day. Actually, it's a pretty close tournament. She's leading by 1 stroke. She's on the 16th hole. And she hits a big drive, but she hooks it, and it goes in the left rough. Now, aren't galleries like there are today, and there's not Arnie's Army out there to, make sure he's got a good lie, whereas Nicholas's Army, they're stepping on the ball. I mean, There's none of that for her. She's got to go find it. And she's in grass, I don't know, a little below her knee. And okay, she finds the ball. And she just hacks it, knocks it back to the fairway. It's a par 4, so she's line 2. And she next shot, she's got a wedge in her hand, and she hits it stiff. I mean, almost jars it. Got a tap in to save her par. She taps it in. And her opponent makes par. And they're playing together. They're in the last foursome. And as she walks off, it's not my ball. That Titleist that I found in the weeds, that's not my Titleist. Doesn't have my mark. So she tells the official score, and at that time the rules were you had a 2-stroke penalty for hitting the wrong ball. She says, instead of a 4, you got to give me a 6. So she went from being leading the tournament by 1, now she's behind by 1. She pars 17 and 18, so does her opponent, and she loses the Ladies U.S. Open. And all the media go to the lady who's won it. You've beaten the babe. I mean, this is just unbelievable. Well, Babe's best friend comes up to her because she's kind of alone walking off to sign her scorecard. And, babe. You gave yourself a 2-stroke penalty back there at 16. It cost you the tournament. It cost you the U.S. Open. Nobody would have known. What did Babe say? I would have known. See, that's integrity. And that's what our chief understood was important in our Air Force. First and foremost, that we be men and women of integrity. And then I'll tell you, it's right out of the Bible. Service before self almost goes without saying. You put on a uniform, you're not going to be a millionaire. I'll never forget, when I was the head of all personnel, I made a lot of trips out to bases. And I loved to get in the auditorium, and I'd have all the airmen. Or I loved to get with the senior NCOs. Then I get the JOs, the junior officers. Then, of course, I always had to visit with whoever the wing commander and his senior staff, bunch of colonels. Those guys, I don't need them. I want to talk to the young folks. I remember getting with airmen one time saying, anybody here think you're going to be a millionaire by joining the Air Force? And I actually had a hand go up. I said, young man, you and I need to talk. I'm a millionaire in a lot of things, but it's not in money. It's in friendships. It's in camaraderie. It's in loving what I do. So we weren't going to make $1 million serving in the military. So it's pretty clear. You've decided to give service before self. I told you I was at NATO as a full colonel, and I actually got promoted to 1-star in that assignment. I was in Belgium. We're living there together, and families with us, and Belgium was okay. It wasn't quite Germany, but it was okay. I'm back at a conference in Norfolk, Virginia, with SAC Lant. I'm at SHAPE. These are all just terms that have to do with high-level staffs on the NATO world. And I get a call from a colonel who's the exec to a 4-star that I knew pretty well. I had checked him out in the A7, and I knew General O. And he says, hey, Tex, if you're nearby, General O wants to, he was going to talk to you on the phone, but can you get over here to Langley? I was in Norfolk. That's just 30 minutes away. I said, I'll be there in 20 minutes. He said, you can't get it. I'll be there in 20 minutes. So I get in the car and I race over to Langley Air Force Base. I go into the 4-stars office, and Colonel Johnson escorts me in and says, he's going to offer you a command. I said, well, I hope so. I mean, I'm expecting. I don't have it pinned on, but I've been promoted to 1-star. I'm hoping to get a command, wing command, and I'm thinking about all those F-16 wings out there that I'd be perfect to command. Shaw and Hill, and go on and on, Luke. So I go in to see General O, and he beats me up a little bit and says, yeah, it's a good thing you married up. That's why you're doing so well. I should be talking to Ann, not you, but you're here. So I want you to take command of the 24th Wing. That's in Howard Air Force Base. Howard Air Force Base. There's no F-16s there. That's in Panama City, Panama. I said, What do you say to a 4-star? Anybody know what you say to a 4-star? That's what you say to a 4-star. Yeah, you got that down. Yeah, it's pretty easy. I salute smartly, and he kicks me out. As I walk out, Colonel Johnson sitting there, it's, I don't know, 4 in the afternoon. Herb goes, you need a DSN or Audubon? You need to call Ann? I said, yeah, please. Well, she's back in Belgium. So, you know, we got this military phone system, and he sets it up, and I call, and it's midnight back in Belgium. But Ann knows we kind of been expecting something to come along. So she picks the phone up, and all she says is, tell me where we're going. I said, well, I just saw General Lowe, and okay, you're going to Air Combat Command. Now tell me where we're going. And she's thinking the same. Is it going to be, you know, Hill or Myrtle Beach or Luke or Shaw? Or... I said, well, we're going to the 24th Wing. That mattered much to her as it did to you. And I said, it's in Howard Air Force Base. She actually knew where that was. She says, what? In Panama City. She says, you don't mean Florida. I said, no, Panama City, Panama. And she says to me, don't they shoot people down there? Y'all remember what happened in December 1989? There was a coup, and we helped make it happen. We took down a guy named Noriega, who was a dictator, and he was atrocious. And he had actually captured and killed a Navy lieutenant. And in 3 days, we took that country down. A lot of Americans had forgotten about it, don't even know about it. Ann knew about it. She says, no, that's long. It's real peaceful now. So she says to me, on the phone now, she says, well, at least it's not Alaska. I went, you know, she's trying to put on a good game face. This is good. So I finished that conference. We go back. I've got a month or two to finish. And we come home, I think, for 1 week of leave vacation to see family. And we show up in Panama. And I got to tell you, Ann had some trepidation about it. Wow. One of the best assignments we ever had. We'd been there 12 months. I go back to a conference. General Lowe is retiring. General Ralston's just taken over. And he said, man, you're doing a great job. There was a 4-star named McCaffrey who was the Army 4-star down in Southcom, which was in Panama. And it was my job to keep him off the backs of my 3- and 4-star bosses. And I did a pretty good job of that. And they loved it. Said, man, you're keeping McCaffrey at bay, so keep doing what you're doing. I said, we love this assignment. We gotten very involved with it. We found my vice commander was later a BSF teacher. Can you believe that, Paul? My OG and his wife we were all part of the chapel community. In fact, I got to tell you, when we left, the commander came in after me and said, this place got way too Christian. What's going on around here? So we had a great time. I'm back for this conference at the 12-month point. Yeah, you're doing great. Another year. I'm out a bass boat. I mean, we're loving being there. And then I get a phone call one day. It's in August. I've only been back from the conference a month. And my secretary says, sir, you got General Ralston on the phone. This is a 4-star. He never calls me. What's he doing calling me direct? Hey, Tex, it's me, Joe. Oh, yes, sir. I don't call him Joe. You've been doing a great job, but man, I need you. I need you somewhere else. And I need to get you back in the F-16. I got an F-16 wing. It's really not in my command, but you know where I came from. And I'm really close with Senator Stevens. You're the right guy to go take command of this wing. It's the 354th Wing in Eielson Air Force Base, Alaska. What do you say to 4-star? So I hang up the phone and I tell the secretary, I'll be out of the office for a few minutes. I go down my back steps, get my staff car. Our house is right there on base. I don't know, 3 or 4 blocks. I go up the hill to where our house is. And we got a nice wing commander house there. And I come walking in the kitchen door. I don't know, is it 2 o'clock in the afternoon? And Ann goes, what are you doing here? I never walk in the middle of the day. I said, well, she says, we have an assignment. Where are we going? How can that be? I got to tell you, Ann's my best friend. She reads me like a book. We kind of finish each other's sentences these days. It's almost embarrassing, but she could tell. I said, babe, we need to go sit down on the couch for a minute. Just tell me where we're going. I said, all right. We're going to the 354th Wing, Eielson Air Force Base, Fairbanks, Alaska. Well, Ann Brown says, well, at least it's not. She never finished. You'll have to ask her what she was thinking because she's never said. What she did say was, it doesn't matter. I realized I prejudged this assignment, and this was a great assignment. I'm not going to prejudge again. If we're together, our family's together, we go. That's when I realized my wife, my kids, all those wives and kids of other, that's who service before self applied to. It's the families. I mean, we get to go fly airplanes. We get to go fly jets and have fun. It's the families when the conditions are difficult. That's service before self. And that's exactly what Christ talked about when he gave the last commandment. He's with the disciples, and they said, what are the greatest, and they're trying to get him to relive the 10 commandments. You have no God before me. But the second was, love your neighbor as yourself. Love each other as I have loved you. That's what service before self, caring and loving others. Our chief understood that's what our Air Force needed to do. Well, the last value he gave us was excellence. Excellence in all you do. I talked about that tall drink of water named Jimmy Jones that was my lead singer in my quartet. Well, he came in as a lieutenant, and he's the new guy, so the new guy gets the worst job in the squadron. He got to be what we call the snacko. Keep the snack bar stocked. And I've gone through, I don't know, as a commander, I probably had 5 or 6 different snackos. Every 2 or 3 months, a new lieutenant shows up, you're the snacko. And it was okay. Boy, that young Lieutenant Jimmy Jones looks at me in the eye and says, I'm going to be the best snacko you ever had. I'm like, well, who is this guy? And he was. Man, we had the best snack bar. It was always stocked. Everybody loved it, and that's the life of the squadron. Well, I should have realized that guy was going somewhere. Because, see, he understood excellence in all you. Whatever you do, do it to the best of your ability. I don't care what job you're given. I remember a couple of jobs I was given I didn't want. Do the best you can. Jimmy Jones retired as a 2-star and would have gone on further, but he decided he needed to retire for his family. I saw that as a lieutenant. This kid's going to go a long way. So integrity, service, excellence, those are things that our chief gave our Air Force. They're implied in almost every service. We just have those to hang on to, like Marines have Semper Fi to hang on to. We needed something. But Christ gave us those same kind of values to hang on to. And I hope in your walk, in your daily life, study the Word, stay in the Word, just have a little talk with Jesus when you need it. Thank you all. Thank you for being here tonight.